I am your host, Jessica Reynolds, and our instructor slash master rigger for the day is Mr. Alexander Matthews. So, Alex, if you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I have been in the industry doing animation and character rigging for about 11, going on 12 years now, I believe. Um, and today I'm going to be taking you through some of or my best practices in terms of how I approach rigging and specifically rigging 360 character rigs in Toon Boom Harmony. Um, right now, I'm based in Ottawa. I actually work for Toon Boom, demoing the software to clients, whether it be studios or schools. So people seem to think that I know what I'm doing. So this is why I'm here to show you around the software. Okay.
Most of the people who are in already are pretty familiar with Toon Boom and rigging, but just for the benefit of those newer persons who may not have had experience in Toon Boom or touch a character rig, I would appreciate if you give them just a brief overview of what we will be doing. Like, what do you mean when you say rigging?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, so character rigging is basically the method of creating a character puppet within Harmony. And the character puppet is made up of several different drawings, which are all connected together in what's known as a rig hierarchy. So I just said at the beginning of this workshop, I'll just be going over a couple of things for those not familiar with the software. So we'll be looking at some of the drawing tools that we will be using to create our rigs, some of the color palette options that you have as well. And then we'll be looking at the node view while we get into it. So for those not familiar with the software, what you're seeing right now is your welcome screen. This is where you're going to create your scene for your character rig. And here you can name your scene. You can choose where you want to store it. You have the option of choosing the resolution that you want to be working in. As you see here, there are quite a few options. And then on the right side here, this is where you're going to see all of the previous scenes that you've opened. And if you hover over any one of them, you'll actually be able to see where it's stored on your computer. Also have that handy open button there that you can use to search for the rig or animated scene that you want to work on. And you'll be looking for usually the .x stage file like you see right here. Or you'll just have that handy little icon to let you know that that's the file that you're looking for. This is actually a rig that we'll be looking at later. But let's actually jump into the file that I have prepared for this demonstration. I will be keeping this workshop very loose. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Jess can interrupt me at any point, as she usually does, to let me know what any of the questions are. Okay, so here we are. We are in our software, and we are seeing the user interface or the workspace that I have created for myself for this specific workshop here. So we can very easily go ahead and resize any of these windows and tabs here that we have. We can add tabs by clicking on this plus button here to select from our options and create the workspace that is best suited for the process that we're doing within the animation pipeline, whether it be animating or like we're going to be doing rigging. Once you have created your own unique workspace, you can actually save it using the workspace manager, and you can actually take it with you if you're happening to move around workstations as well. So that's actually very, very handy. What we will be looking at, as I mentioned, we'll be going through some of the drawing tools that you have available to you. When working in Toon Boom, whether it be Storyboard Pro or Harmony, you do have the option of working with both bitmap and vector drawing tools. So bitmap will be your basic like flat raster image created with that's not the one I want, created with pixels.
So is
And
this
then
JPEG, PNG type?
yeah, JPEGs, PNGs. What else can we have there?
I
GIFs
think
are
most people
sometimes
work
in
JPEGs and PNGs.
Yeah.
And so then the
Um,
vectors, if you don't
and
mind.
then the vectors are those are created using math and coordinates in the
Yikes.
X and Y um, axes, which is stuff that I understand but don't understand at the same time.
You understand in theory, but I
Yes.
like to think of it as allowing for near infinite scaling of a
Yes,
drawing without getting the very gross pixelated edge to the line.
absolutely.
But yeah.
So most shows or productions will work in vector for
Mhm.
that very reason, being able to scale your work exponentially. Whether if you're starting working in, say, let's say 1080p, you'll be able to scale your vector image up to 4K without losing any of the quality to that specific piece of artwork. But of course, you can actually just work at 4K right away in the software as well, or 8K, which is another thing these days. So, and that's usually used with most of the like high-end shows. You'll get like
Mhm.
4K with Netflix and those places, and then 8K can push it even further for those people that like to have the artwork like right in their face on your
Okay.
big
So
70-inch screens.
oh, okay, because I was gonna ask like this kind of plays into more the size, the aspect ratio that you're gonna be
Yes.
watching in. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, if you wanted to create our work in bitmap, because that's also a raster, that's also an option. When you create a drawing that you see here in your node view, whether you do it here, you can actually add drawings on your timeline down here as well. By
Cool.
clicking on this button here, you can see you have drawing here. This is where you can add drawings. You can name it anything that you like.
Please name it properly though, because timelines get very confusing very fast.
Yes, absolutely. Things need to be very clean when you're building rigs, actually. So we'll just add that there so you can see you can have add your drawings here as well. But if you want to work with your bitmap brushes, you can go into your layer properties here by clicking that magic yellow box there on the right side of your node. And then you can go to your drawings tab where you can see we have our art layers. So you can switch them from vector to bitmap if you want to. So we'll just add bitmap layers on the line art and color art for this particular drawing. And if you want to do it while you're creating a drawing, you can do it right here as well. So that's another thing. What's also really awesome about adding drawings is that we do have this handy little extended exposure for scene duration option here. So this will make sure that that first drawing will be extended for the duration of your scene. So this is something that was added, I think, either in Harmony 21 or 20, which a lot of artists were really screaming for, riggers included. So this is also an option that you have as well. So let's work here on our vector, on our, sorry, our bitmap drawing. So now that I've selected it and I've created the line art and the color art to be bitmap, you see that we've lost some tools over here. That is because if I go onto my overlay art layer,
Quick
we'll see that
question.
we
So you're
have,
talking, so apologies for interrupting, but you're
no problem.
talking about the layer system in Toon Boom. So do you mind elaborating a little bit more in that? Because I know, again, some of us are familiar,
Yep.
but some people may have some difficulty with the basic 4-layer system that you find in Toon Boom's. Um,
Drawings.
yes, there
Yep,
we go.
no problem. So by default, when you open your first instance of Toon Boom, you're actually only going to see your line art and color art. But we do have 4 options in terms of our art layers. It's kind of similar to Photoshop, but not quite. But we do have the overlay art layer, the art layer, color art, and underlay art layers. Now, if you want to utilize all 4 of them, you actually have to go into your preferences. And if I remember, it's over here in advanced, your advanced tab, here at the very top, support overlay and underlay arts. So that will give you the option to have these 2 extra art layers that you can use to actually create your artwork on your drawings. So you can actually consider drawings as a layer themselves, because you can layer your drawing nodes, as you see down here on the timeline. But within those drawing nodes, you'll have those 4 art layers that you can utilize to create your artwork. So this little guy here is actually was created by our good friend Charisse.
Ooh.
His name is, or their name is Mez. I asked her for something very simple for this workshop, so she created this little guy for me. So this is the dude that we'll try to create the turnaround for on our timeline. Now, I just want to let those people know that if you're working with your bitmap brush, you can actually use any of the presets that are readily available to you with using Harmony, or you can even go ahead and create your own unique bitmap brush by clicking on that little button there to bring up the bitmap brush properties, where you can see we have some options for textures already here. We can add textures or import textures by finding them in our hard drive or our system. We can also import and export from here as well. We have the options of adding transparency to the brushes. Dual tip will allow you to add more than 1 texture to your brush. And you even have the option of adding paper texture as well. And under the tip tab here, next to your maximum and minimum size, we have a newer feature these days. I think this once again came with 21. You have the option to actually define how the maximum and minimum size of the brushes are generated, whether it be by pen pressure, the tilt or angle of the pen as you're drawing on your tablet. And this is, of course, if your drawing tablet has that functionality. And then you also have the option of by speed, the speed at which you're drawing as well. And then you can actually invert those options also. So if I wanted to invert the pressure, that would mean that the lighter that I press on the pen or the tablet, the thinner the line would be. Regular pressure sensitivity means that the harder you press, the thicker the line will become. So that's how you will create your own unique brush there. Once you have created it, it will be stored in your preset list right here, where you can then export it to share with others if you want to keep things consistent across like the rigging or animation pipeline. And then you can see here that this is where you could also import any brushes that are shared with you as well. If you're working in a vector, you also have the option of some brushes here available to you already. And then you can once again create your own vector brushes here as well. You can see now that we have a brush type. So we have solid and textured vector. With the textured vector, you're going to see the previous textures that you saw with your bitmap brush here for you to use. And then once again, you can go ahead and set how those maximum and minimum size of your brushes will be generated as well. And you can share these and export and import these brushes also. I'll just give you a quick look at what the difference between the bitmap and the vector brushes are. So I'm going to go on my other tab here. The drawing tab is actually used for when you want to focus in on a specific drawing in your scene, which will allow you to get rid of all of the other distractions that might be there. So I'll just quickly draw a little smiley face here. And when you're working with your bitmap, you'll see that once you have drawn your artwork, it will be one flat shape, but you can use your select tool to go ahead and squash and stretch it, rotate it, and then if you want to skew it as well, you can do that with your select tool there. Now, if you're happening to be working with a vector brush, I'll do the same guy here, maybe not as similar. Now with the vector brush, if I select it with my select tool, I can actually select all of the individual pieces of brush strokes that I've created there. I can zoom in here for you to show you that I can now, with the help of my contour editor here, actually go ahead and adjust my brush strokes if I want to have it look very stylized as well. And then we also have the centerline editor. I see your question there, Francis. I'll get to you in a second. With the centerline editor, we can now see the centerline that runs through that brush stroke. So we can go ahead and add contour points to help us modify that line as well, which is very, very handy when you're using your vector brush. And then as you can see, you can use your Bezier handles here to adjust the lines as well. So Francis is asking, what if someone starts off their artwork in bitmap, get to a point where you don't want to start over, but you want to continue your artwork in vector? What are the options available? So the best practice in that case would be to use your bitmap for your sketch work and that kind of stuff, and then go over into the cleanup with using um, your vector drawing tools. I personally have not come across someone who has worked in bitmap before. Um, Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. And then wanted to go over into vector. But we can check something here really quickly. I just want to see if you have an option here. Yeah, no, the best bet, Francis, is just to make sure that you start working in vector from the very start to avoid a situation like that. Um, through the bitmap brush and the vector brushes here, I can quickly show you the pencil tool, because this is the more widely used tool when we're actually cleaning up our artwork. Over here in tool properties, you would have seen me like adjusting the size of our pencil or our brush over here, so we can input a value here if we want to, or choose one from any of the presets that we have. So I'll just quickly do a nice little squiggle there. With this line now, you do have the center line running through the center of the pencil line, and then we can go ahead and use our contour points and our Bezier handles to adjust that line as we need as well. We can also select our pencil line, come over here in our tool properties, or we can adjust the size of the stroke after the fact, as you see me doing here on my slider, or I can go ahead and input a value here as well. We have some presets here where we can change the tapering style of our line also. And then we can even go ahead and add texture to our pencil lines if we want, because we do have the option to work with texture pencil in the software as well. And one great thing that came out with Harmony 22 is that if you're working with your textured pencil, where you can add a texture here, while you're drawing, you'll actually get a live preview of your texture being applied to your line, just like that. Before you would have to, or when you were drawing, it would appear as a solid pencil line, and then the texture will be applied after the fact. So this is a nice new feature that came up with 22, which I haven't really used much of personally, and I really should. Another thing that you can do with the pencil line is, if you want to, you can select it, go to drawing, convert pencil lines to brush strokes, and this will now create your brush strokes out of your pencil line. As you can see, the contour line has changed from the center to the outside, and then we can go ahead and adjust our lines like that, and you can see that really maintains the texture of the line as well. So that's another handy feature.
That's with the contour editor, Alex.
To adjust the contour lines.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
The white little white arrow right here.
Yes. Thanks.
No problem. And yeah, so we'll be using the pencil a lot today. Well, I'll show you something, a nice little technique that helps me when I'm doing like turnarounds for heads and stuff. I'm going to use a pencil line to um, draw that. But I just want to show you that we do have some shape tools as well. I utilize these quite a bit in terms of creating the different shapes that I'll be using for my rig. We have the rectangle, ellipse, line, and polyline. Those familiar with Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator will recognize this because it is similar to the pen tool in Illustrator. We can create our lines very similar to how we do in Illustrator with that polyline tool. I personally don't use it that often. I prefer to like grab the shape tool like a rectangle or an ellipse, draw my shape, and then go ahead and get rid of any contour points that I have and adjust my lines this way. Now, to bend your lines, if they're straight, you can hold down Shift on your computer and you can pull your lines to get them into different shapes like that. And once you do this, you'll be able to see that we now have some bezier handles that we can use to adjust our lines that way too. We do also have the line tool, which I utilize often as well. So we have different options with the line tool. Over here in the tool properties, we've got the straight line, the auto-generated curve, and the S-curve line modes. So with the straight line, you can go ahead and draw your straight lines. With the auto-generated curve, you can draw your lines and then you can actually push and pull your lines to get the curve that you want. And then with the S-curve, you can draw your line. You will set the curve at the top first, and then you can set the curve at the bottom second. And it's just that easy to create different lines as well. In terms of creating tapering to your lines, if you want to have a specific style to your pencil lines, we have this pencil editor here, where we can select our pencil line. Now we see we have it outlined in red, which is adjust the thickness of our line. And we can use these to very easily, if my pen will work with me. Are we going to get a crash? Yes, we are. Hooray.
Hey, I love software.
Welcome to Harmony. And
Yeah.
we're going to actually do a little test here because if that crash happened because of that that pencil line editor, I've got something to report at work.
Oh dear. And also, this is a good time to plug the autosave feature.
Yes, we do
Just
have the autosave feature, which
yes,
is very important. That can be turned on, I believe, in your preferences as well.
yes.
And you
So
don't
then you.
actually use the autosave feature. Where is it?
Oh wow, you live in life
Oh,
on
there it is.
pension,
It's right here. No, that's the workspace.
and you can
Advanced.
set how often it autosaves as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
So
question. I know it's somewhere in here. Oh, there it is. It's right there. Autosave. They
yes.
save automatically, and you can change the intervals like every 10 minutes or so. Personally, I do not enjoy using the autosave feature because in the eventuality that your scene does crash, it might have saved at a point that you actually don't want it to save.
Mm.
And then you will have lost work that way. Of course, not saving will also cause you to lose work as well.
It's
But
a preference thing, I imagine.
yeah, it's a preference thing. Um, like me, I have a little twitch in my hand now, so I control S like every now and then, and multiple times. It's like click, 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 to make sure that things have saved. But yes, if you do want to automatically save your work, you do have that option here in the preferences under general. I was blind earlier, so I couldn't actually see it, but right
Oh
here at the
dear.
top.
And Francis has also mentioned that you can potentially invite corruption into the file.
Yes,
So
that's another thing too.
yes.
Okay, so we were looking at the using your pencil editor to shape your lines. So let me just go ahead and try this again for you guys. And if we get another crash, I'm going to make a note. So let's see, pencil editor. Set my line. Can I add stuff now? Yep. Okay. And okay. No crash. Awesome. So here we go. With your pencil editor here, you can adjust the thickness of your line, so you can go ahead and create your own unique taper to your lines that way, in case you have like a special stylized piece of art that you're working on. For example, we have a nice little cut here with our sleeve. So I can actually just quickly go ahead and do this for you. So this is just a quick example of how I create the sleeve. I'll grab my rectangle tool there. I will reposition my stuff like this to get the general shape of my sleeve. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So, and then from here, you can just go ahead and add some contour points, delete the stuff in between them, and grab our pencil editor. And then we'll add another point here. We can adjust that like this. Here we go. And then add some more points here. And there we have a nice little stylized sleeve. Now, this is a good time to talk about filling your artwork with color. So let's look at our color tab right here. Now, with the color tab, you're able to create multiple palettes for your scene. As you see, I have two here. I have a day palette here. I'm going to actually use this to show you how you can actually create a night palette. So this, when you create your scene, you're going to get like a default scene palette as well, where you'll have like these colors that you see here. But general practice is you get rid of the default palette and then create your own with the handy plus button here, and to create your new palette, and then you can start adding your colors that way. Adding colors is very easy as well. We can click on our plus sign here, which will add a new color to my list. I can double click on it to pull up my multi-wheel color picker here, or I can use my single wheel mode if I don't need to do any like hue or saturation type stuff to my colors. I prefer to work with my multi-wheel. You can add alpha to your color, so you can make it slightly transparent or very transparent. And then from here, you can go ahead and select your color from the different options that you have here. Use your sliders to create the color that you want. Let's see if I can match this color here. Here. And let's bring this down. Let's say that. And once you're done, you have a nice new color swatch right here to go ahead and use. Now, every swatch that you do create in your palette has its own unique color identification number. And it is something that the software will recognize wherever it is used across the timeline. And that is great because you can actually go ahead and adjust your colors without actually having to repaint anything. Now, if I wanted to fill this shape that I just created with color, I would generally use my handy paint tool here. I'm going to select that new color that I created, and I would go here and I want to click. But as you can see, by clicking, it's not doing anything. That's because we have some gaps in our shape. Now, to see the gaps, you can click K on your keyboard, where you can see the contour lines of your brush strokes. And from here, what I would do is I would either use the stroke tool here to create an invisible line to close my shapes. And then I would use my contour editor, turn on this handy snapping tool right here, select my contour points and snap them to the ends of my line. Or I can use my close gap, where I can draw a line between 2 points to close it quickly that way. Once I do that, I can now go ahead and fill my shape with color. Now, speaking of color, we do also have the options of the art layers. So I'm going to go back to my drawing tab here. Oops. I'll undo that. And I'll get rid of this line because we don't need it anymore. So generally, we'll put our line work of our art here on our line art. And then on the color art layer, this is where we would generally fill our shapes with color. And what you would do if you haven't, if you're not creating them as you draw, because you do have that option as well with the pencil tool here. I believe it's this one. Nope, that's not that one. This one. Right, there's this option here to automatically close the gap. So you will actually fill in any places that are not completely closed. And here we go, automatically create color art. So if you have this turned on, while you draw, you'll automatically create the paintable areas for you on your color art. If you don't have this turned on, like I don't here, then you'll simply go right here to your create color art from line art, click that button, and you can see now that it will generate the paintable area that I can now go ahead and fill with color. And then that saves me from having to have too many things on my one layer. So this is a great way to utilize the different art layers as well. All right. So in terms of the color management system as well, we'll just go here and I will show you that if I want to change this color here, all I have to do is double click on my color. And I did select everything. And then I can go ahead and switch it. And as you can see, that is that easy to change the color in the software as well. So once again, saving you from having to unpaint an area and then repaint it with a new color. All right. Cool. Let me see. I think that pretty much covers some of the basic tools that we will be using when we go ahead and create our rigs. So at this point, let me just
so we've got a question here from Francis. So he's asking if there's an option to select the color directly from your artwork one-on-one in Harmony. Trying to match colors may seem like a tedious job.
Oh, yes. Very good point, Francis. Thank you for that. So when you are like me, you will have your reference material in the background here. And when you are creating your palette, what you'll be doing is, let me just turn off my transparency here, is you'll be using your color picker. You can add another color here, double click on it. And right here on your multi-wheel color window, we have our handy eyedropper tool, and we can just easily go ahead and hover over the color that we want to create and release, and that will sample that color and create the color swatch for you. So that is how you would generally do it. You wouldn't be like me and try to see if you can be a savant and, you know, blend colors by actually just looking at them. And then they're easy enough to get rid of any colors that you create as well. You can just hit this handy, oops, something is using that, and that's fine. You can just get rid of it here. Now, the other thing that you can do with your color management system is, and let me actually, oh yes, we have him there. Let's disable this guy here. You can actually create different palettes for different times or of day or different environments. So if I wanted to create a night palette for my guy here, what I can do is I can right click, I can clone my palette, and I can call this new palette night. And then I can click OK. That will add the new palette here. And by cloning, what it will do is it will copy the colors that were on the other palette. They will still be different, but you'll be able to now switch between the two palettes very easily. So I'm actually going to bring up this to the top here. So we have our night palette. And now that we have that, I can right click again, go to my tint panel. And what I'll be doing is I'm going to be blending some colors. So I'm going to select the colors that I want to blend here. Then I can choose the blend color that I want. I actually want it to be black, but you can go ahead and pick any color from your color picker here. You can turn on your preview, and then you can go ahead and shift this little slider here to adjust your colors. And then you can get a nice darker palette for if your character is in a nighttime environment, for example, or it's like lurking in the shadows. Now, what would actually be pretty cool is if I did not put the eye in there, so that his eyes glow when he's in the shadows as well. So you can see you have that option also. I just hit apply, and that will create the light palette for me. And now I can swap between my two palettes very easily like that. And I can go ahead and work in the daytime or work in the nighttime. All right. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's a very nice little trick there that you can go ahead and do for creating your different palettes for your different types of scenes. Now, what we will talk about is getting into the nitty gritty of actually doing your character rig. And what I like to do is I like to set my scene up right away with all of the different materials, like reference materials that I might need for my character. Now, we saw our little turnaround here, which was well done. From here, what I like to do is you can see I've added a peg to my drawing here. So the peg will allow me to move it around. I have locked it here, so I can unlock it and I can select it and then move it around within my camera view here. I like to turn on this here, the safe area. It'll give me like a little X here indicating the center of my camera, and well, yeah, the center of my camera. And I like to orient my characters or the props right here in the center of the screen. Generally, you don't want to be like rigging all over the place within your scene. You want everything nice and centered. So once I do that, you can see on my timeline here, I create different keyframes for my different views because I'm going to be creating a rotating view. So it needs to rotate on the spot. So I will create different keyframes and move my reference material around on that particular spot. Another thing that I like to do is add some transparency or a transparency node here. This will add some alpha or make your image transparent. You can find that by hitting enter on your keyboard when you're in your node view. And then you can type in the search for transparency, and there it is. And then you can just hold down Alt and snap it directly under your drawing there to add the transparency to your artwork. So once I have that, the next thing that I like to do sometimes is I add a cutter node. Oops.
And for the folks at home, a cutter node is not, in fact, a sandwich.
Nah.
It is a very important part of the rigging process.
Yeah, I will definitely have a look at the uses of it in a little bit too. So I can talk about it really quickly here. So you have two types of cutters. Like this first type of cutter will cut away areas of your object, and then the inverse cutter will allow things to be trapped within the shape of the cutter that you're creating. Now the cutter needs to be a drawing. Go
Alex,
ahead.
we have a question. So someone's asking, what is a node?
What's a node? Okay, so nodes are these things that we're seeing here. So this is a drawing node. This is a peg node. We have a transparency node here. So these are just different tools that you can use within your node view. And the node view is just your non-linear view of everything that's going on within your scene. This is where riggers spend most of their time. Is it similar to layers? From the drawing node perspective, yes. because you can layer your drawing nodes on your composites, and then things can sit above each other or below each other. Um, Let me see. You can consider like nodes if you're familiar with Photoshop. They're that you can add different effects
To the nodes, to
to
the
the
layers, sorry, yeah.
to the drawings, whether it be like adding shadows or lighting to your artwork. All of the different nodes can actually be found right here in the node library. And because I'm using Harmony Premium, I have access to all of the different nodes
Oh, there
here.
it
So
is.
we have like we have particle effects nodes where we can add like different like sparkly effects or snow effects to our scenes. We have our shading nodes here where we can add different lighting to our artwork. Deformation nodes for when we're actually creating our rigs and want to add different tools to help our animators when they're working in the cutout animation pipeline. And just very quickly, there are two types of pipelines. There's the paperless animation pipeline, where you're going to be doing multiple drawings across your timeline in different poses and positions. And then you have the cutout animation pipeline, where you actually be using character rigs. I see them as visual representations of information in your timeline. Those have layers, line art, color art. Yeah, that's a very good note there, Francis. Thanks. And yeah, so I hope
So
that helped you,
to kind
Ariel.
of bring it back to the rigging then,
Yep.
what do you think would be like the most, because you mentioned the cutters earlier, what are kind of like the key nodes that you'll be using in the rigging
Um,
process?
okay, so the key nodes would generally be your drawing node. This is what's going to make up the different pieces of your puppet. Then you have your pegs, which will this is where you're going to be adding your pivot information to help them, your animators, move the drawings around to put your character into different poses. You can have your cutter nodes to help you with creating, like, say, eyes and mouth rig setups. You can also use um, layer splitter nodes. So you will have, for example, your line art node here. So this will allow you to isolate just the line art of a particular layer without seeing all of the other art layers. And everything that goes into the composite here, this is what will be exported. So whatever is plugged into the composite is what you will see when you hit export to see your animation. So that is something else to consider. It really like controls the information, as Francis says, coming out from a particular drawing. So that's kind of what nodes are. But yeah, so we have our cutter nodes. So you have our art splitter nodes, like the line art, color art, overlay, splitter nodes. We have our pegs. We'll have deformer nodes, but deformers are generally created, quote unquote, automatically by the softwares. You can build your own deformers, which is something I'll be looking at in a little while. But yeah, I think those are the nodes that we'll be primarily using, especially for something as simple as this character right here. Yeah, so I was telling you another thing that I like to do when setting up my scene here is I like to create a drawing. And then with this drawing, what I do is I will actually just grab a rectangle and I'll draw a shape around my character like this, for example, and I will fill it with color. And then I will plug that into my inverse cutter here. And as you can see, by plugging that drawing into the cutter, it will cut away everything outside of that drawing shape that I just drew there. If I convert it to the regular cutter, it will cut away whatever is underneath that particular shape. So the inverse cutter plays a big part when you're creating the different eyes or mouse rig hierarchies for your rig there. Now, I do this because once I have created my different keyframes for my different views, I can very easily see what my guy is going to look like, or my character will look like as it rotates on my timeline. So I don't have all of that extra information around that might be very distracting. If I remove this, your eye can get very distracted by all of that shifty wifty stuff that's going on. So I like to just section off my character right there in the middle so that I can just see him as he rotates like that.
And you would
Yeah.
say this is a good way to kind of test the 360 rotation of the
Yes,
rig.
absolutely. With this one here, you can see that some things might be moving out of place. For example, if you look here, that another drawing, we have our shoulders right here.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go on to my other drawing, okay, my shoulders are shifted down, which is something that you don't want to happen. So what you would do, or what I did, was I actually went ahead and I did some sketch work. Now here, I believe this is the right drawing. Yep, that's the right drawing. So we'll just unplug that for a second. So I used my little method there for cutting away my character, and I just went through and did some draw overs to make sure that my shoulders remain in the same place generally, and everything else is moving in the right position for my turnaround. I even did one for the head as well, just to make sure that I was moving my face elements in the right place as well. So you can see you can go ahead and utilize those basic drawing techniques to make sure that everything falls into place when you're doing your rotation. So this is a very good practice when you're doing your 360 rigs, is just to do a little draw overs to make sure everything is lining up as it should be. And even here on the last the back view, quarterback view here, we can see that the head has moved up significantly from the front view here. So that's another reason to kind of plot out how your character is going to be turning around before you actually start rigging. Now you'll also notice that I did leave out some stuff here, like his collar. That is because full transparency, sometimes I'm a little lazy when I'm rigging, and I wanted to leave out the color because it might get a little bit confusing if I'm doing too many things with the turnaround.
Yeah, because at this stage, it looks like you're mostly testing how clean the 360 rotation is.
Yep.
So obviously you can come back to the finer details later once you make sure that the key elements are turning around the way that you want them to.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so once you have set up your turnaround, you've done some reference work there to make sure everything is lining up how you want. And just so you know, I do also utilize this handy the handy alignment guides here, just to make sure that everything lines up exactly where I need it to be, so we can add our guides here, and then we can shift them up and down to make sure that everything is lining up. We have our vertical ones as well that we can use. They're very handy for doing your 360 turnarounds as well. And then if you don't need to see them anymore, you can just click here to hide them. To get your alignment guides, if you don't see them right away, just right click on your toolbar here, and then we have them right here at the top. Okay,
so we have a question from Francis.
Yep.
Sorry. So when creating builds of humanoid or anthropomorphic characters, how important is a basic knowledge of anatomy? Are builders typically expected to have that knowledge when putting a build together?
Generally, as a character rigger, you don't necessarily need to have um, a like basic knowledge of anatomy, because what you're really doing is just tracing artwork. It is a good thing to have though, especially if you're doing a turnaround like this one, where you have to know exactly where things should fit on
Hmm.
the body. So that's a very decent question there, Francis. Um,
So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna build on, pun not intended, build on Francis's question.
yep.
So, whereas you may not need a basic knowledge of anatomy, should a rigger have a good understanding of how the character is meant to move?
Yes, absolutely. So when you are building, well, before you start building your rig, you should always look at any animation references that the production might have. Or if you're doing something for yourself, look up some references of animation that you would like to kind of recreate, and then you will know exactly how flexible you want to create your rig. Now, this one here that you're seeing that I started work on is a very simple rig in terms of the type of movement that it'll be able to do. Um, but that is definitely something that you should also look at before you start building. Like, check to see exactly what, whether it be like an animatic, which is playable storyboard, or a storyboard like on paper. You can just rifle through it and see what the character is going to be doing. And then you can make your decisions on how much you have to break down your character's character design, or how little you have to break it down. Because there are some cases where a character might only be on the screen for maybe a scene and he's not doing anything, he's just standing there, in which case, and generally, even if you're doing a build for a character that's just standing in the scene, you're going to want to break him down into all of the different pieces, like body, arms, legs, separate the legs into two pieces, or add a bone or curve deformer, which is something I will also give you a look at in a second. Just so in the case that maybe the client says, oh, but you know what, I actually do want that character to move, which always happens. You'll have thought of that and produced a rig that will be able to move um, easy as well. But yes, very good point, Jess. You really should look at any animation reference that you have before you start doing your rigs. Yeah.
So, I guess since we're kind of having this conversation,
Hmm.
uh, the name of the workshop is Rigging in 360. So,
Hmm.
when we're looking at the animatic or the storyboard material, talking with
Hmm.
production or whoever,
Hmm.
when would we decide, when would we make the executive decision to build a 360 rig?
Okay, so in those cases, once again, you have to be looking at um, your reference material. If you're seeing that there's going to be a lot of subtle like movements between, like, say, the front facing view and the quarter front angle, you might want to consider having a 360 rig where you can very easily in between those two different views, because the software will allow you to auto in between or add movement between keyframes, which is what we'll be doing and when creating the rig. But it's a case by case scenario. I have been working on a project that was asked for 360 rigs, which might have worked better with an individual rig with in either individual views, like separate rigs for the different views, or we have something which is known as integrated rig, where on every keyframe um, the rig is built to that specific view. So there will be some general movement between the different views, but not as much and not as smoothly as you would get with your 360 rig. So um, the executive decision would come during the checking and rechecking of the um, animation reference.
Okay, so to make sure that I'm understanding, because I'm learning just as much as anybody else is.
Hmm.
The 360 really is allowing you to get a good amount of subtlety in the acting and the animation.
Yep. And it's also good for those projects where you might have like beginner animators that are not very practiced in doing like rotations from one view to another. The utilization of the 360 rig is that you can create a different pose on your timeline and then shift it over and be able to in between it without actually having to plot out that movement yourself. So
Mm.
that's another handy way for new animators to be able to get stuff done. Um, there is it catch 22 in that sometimes 360 rigs can be very complex, in which case you're going to need to create, say, a how-to video on how to actually use the 360 rig in the cases that they might have master controllers, for example. I'll show you an example of that a little later as well. But yeah, that's kind of like one of the utilizations of the 360 rig. It's a tool that can help animation move a lot faster.
Mm. Yeah, because in my experience using Harmony,
Mhm.
definitely plotting from view to view. So when you had the full turnaround, I think you had the profile, the 3/4 front, the full frontal, and then the
Mhm.
3/4 back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So trying to get some of those views can be a little bit of a it's a little bit of a hassle,
yeah.
especially if you're a little bit rusty in the software or you're newer to the software. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely very interested in the planning that goes into making a 360 rig because you do have the is it 4 or 5 turnarounds?
There are 4 views here.
Right. So I'm
Yeah.
very interested to see how we go from the 4 views into like the full 360 rotation.
Rotation. Yeah. Um, so one of the things that you can actually do to help yourself kind of learn how to plot out rotations, especially for the head, is actually create a little mini rig for yourself, which I will do for you right now,
Thank you, Alex.
so that you can see how the rotation will actually happen. So I'm just going to go over here in my node view, and I'm going to build out my a little head rig here. So I add my composite here, plug it into my main composite, and I'm going to create a head drawing. And I'm also going to create a X line and a Y line. Now, always confuse the two of these. Which one is vertical, just the X or the Y?
I was gonna ask you, I think X is vertical. Wait, no, this isn't vertical. This is not a vertical hand position. That's a horizontal motion I just made. Oh my days. I was
I
not
believe the Y one is the straight up and down.
we'll go
Either
with
way, we'll
that.
go with that. Yeah. So there we go. See,
Francis has enlightened us. X is in fact horizontal and Y is vertical. Thank
there we
you.
go. I was right.
Yes, and Nathan's also pointed out Y is vertical in most programs. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
there we
you.
go. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we have our X line and our Y line here, and we have our head pegs. And then what we can do is, what we will have to do is we'll have to add another peg here to control both of these pegs. So this is actually showing you what a rigid hierarchy looks like. So anything that exists underneath a peg like this is considered a child of that peg. So you can
Similar
think,
to After Effects, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So we're going to finish off here with another head peg here. And all right, so from here, what we're going to do is now start adding some artwork. So on our head drawing, it'll actually use our head shape right here. I don't want to use that color. Let's use our that color here. So we'll create our head shape. I'll get rid of this snapping. And then we will grab our Y line, get a straight line here. Let's make sure we don't have any curves. And straight up and down. And then we'll get our X line and we'll go straight across here. Now we'll use our X line for our eyes in this case. So we're actually going to place it like right here. I think that's good enough.
Mhm.
All right. So once we've done that, now we can actually talk about our deformers. So we'll actually get rid of this here so we can actually see this stuff a little better. All right. So we need to fill this with color as well. So this is also another great time to show you how we can create or use our cutters. So we're going to add some color art here, and we'll fill it with blue. That's fine. And then we're going to add our deformers to these two lines here. So when it comes to deformers, we're using this tool right here, which is our rigging tool, ironically, to create our deformers on our artwork. So we have to go to our tool properties because we're going to be wanting to create and use the envelope mode here. So there are two types of deformers. There are bone deformers, which you can use to create like a bone joint in your drawing. And then we have a curve deformer, which will allow you to get some really nice, like wibbly wobbly kind of actions to your line. And I will show you right here on this line using this envelope mode. So we've selected our drawing. We're going to add a deformation chain by clicking on that button right there. And then we're going to click and drag like so. Once I've done that, now that I have a deformer on this drawing, I can actually use those deformers to change the shape of that line without having to actually redraw the actual line itself. Similar to the puppet tool in After Effects. I'm not too familiar with After Effects actually. Are you, Jess?
After Effects is quite away from, because I haven't used it in a while. But I do know that you can kind of create, I guess, more rudimentary rigs in After Effects. Yeah, so as Francis pointed out, it's like the puppet tool, but with extra steps and more possibilities. Okay. So yeah, so that is correct. The puppet tool in After Effects does in fact allow for simple movements, but I think it definitely does not allow for the level of flexibility that you have when rigging in Toon Boom.
Cool. All right, so we have added deformers to our two lines here. And now we can talk about our cutters. So we'll add another cutter here. And we're actually going to add another composite as well. And we're going to attach this cutter underneath here. And we're going to make it an inverse cutter. Now on the head drawing, we're going to use our isolation nodes here. So I want a color art one, a line art one, and I also want a color art that we can spell color. So I'm going to isolate my line art. As you can see, you can only now see the line art of my artwork there, and then the color art here. Now, this is where layering comes into play on the composite side of things. So when you're working with your composites, you should know that everything on the left side is going to be on top of everything else that follows after it. So when you look down at your hierarchy that you build here on your timeline, everything that's on the left side of your composite will appear at the top of the list here. So I actually want to have my line art of my head be on top of all of the other lines here. And then what I'll be doing is I'll be using the color art of my head drawing to cut the other the overhanging lines that fall outside of my shape. So this is how you would actually create like pupils within or your eyes for your character. You would separate your line art from your color art and then add a cutter underneath the pupil of your eye and then use the color art to cut it. and then that will make sure that the pupil will only be visible within your eye shape. Now that we have this setup here, what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding our pivot information to our pegs. So we're going to add our pivot here using our advanced animation tool, the rotate option here. And then we're also going to add one to the Y as well in the same spot. And then we have some very handy scripts here in Harmony. You can copy pivot information from one peg to another. And this is a little bit advanced, but we're in an advanced workshop here. So you'll need to have your scripting toolbar open. You can go to manage your scripts here, and then you can find your TB copy paste pivot scripts here, where you can then add them to your toolbar to allow you to do stuff like this. So I want to have the same pivot information for my two other pegs here on this one. So I'll just select my peg. I will click on my copy pivot, and I will select my other peg, and I will click on my paste pivot. So now my pivot information is exactly in the same spot. If you want to do it manually, all you have to do is, let's do it manually here. So on my head peg, I'm going to put my pivot information there. I'll open my layer properties, and I want that same information here. So I will copy and paste it over here, just like that. And now my master peg there is in the exact same spot. So here we have our nice handy little head rig here.
Hey.
So now we're going to create a keyframe at the front for our first view here. And then right here on my second one, I'll create another keyframe. And what I'll do here now is I'll actually move my lines here across. So I'm just going to use my keyboard. I'll hold down Shift, move it across and here. And then I will turn on my deformers so I can see them. And I'm actually going to adjust this line here. So I'll bring it down. So I'll bring this over here like this. And then if we want to, we can also turn on the one here. Oops, I don't want to do that. We'll drag you across that way. All right, so now that we have that, we can add some distance between our two pegs here. And now we can see exactly where things should rotate into when it's going around your head that way. Very handy little tool that you can use. And this will also help you. So going in the middle, you can add your next keyframe here, and then you know that's where your information should be for your quarter front view. So this is really helpful when you're doing your head rotations. And if you want to do head tilts as well, because that's another option that you'll have, just get rid of my in-between here. So right here, what I will do is, let's do a tilt down. So I will grab this peg here. I'll just move this information down like so. And at this point, we're going to have to adjust the deformer here. I have to add some curviness here. So
While Alex is doing that there, it's come to my attention that you can, in fact, do some level of rigging in After Effects. The workflow is just slightly different. And yeah, so that's something that you can experiment with. I know After Effects tends to be pretty good for special effects stuff, whereas Harmony, tends to specialize more in like the 2D animation, rigging, etc. But for those of you who may have access to After Effects, Obviously, the workflow wouldn't be exactly the same, but it is something that you can experiment with in After Effects.
And here we have our head down tilt. It's a little rudimentary, but you get the general idea. You can go ahead and use this to help you plot out your head tilts for your characters as well. So this is a nice little handy tool that I use, as I said, or have been saying, to figure out exactly where things should go when we're doing the rotation of our character's head here. So let's move it down a bit. All right, we can actually know. I wanted to mention really quickly too. You do have the option of doing when you're doing your 360 rig, you can do a 180 or a full 360. Now, there are cases like the ones that we have here. I'm just going to move this here right quickly. And this. So we have a turnaround here that is pretty symmetrical, right? Meaning that everything on one side of the drawing is exactly the same as everything on the other side. So this will allow you to go ahead and just create a simple 180-degree turn for your character, because what you can do is you can also flip your character on the y-axis, so that if you finish doing your 180 turn, you can just flip it and it will rotate in the other direction. There are cases where you might have a character that is a little bit more complicated or asymmetrical, where you would have different things on the opposite sides of the body. In those cases, that's where you're going to actually want to do a full 360 to make sure that everything is moving where it's supposed to be moving on the character.
And this would be 360 in the rig and not in the character turn. Well, no, it would be in both the character turnaround and the rig.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So there isn't necessarily a which one is better. It's a case of which one makes the most sense, time-wise, because rigging a 360 rig is very time consuming, and in the animation industry, time is money. So it's very
I
important.
will say that is true, but I think there is an argument to be made for having the work done up front, because it would be better to have some consideration put into the rig as opposed to having to like perpetually fix the rig during production.
Oh, yes. Well, absolutely, for sure. For sure. There are cases as well with asymmetrical characters. If you just want to do like one turn in one direction, say from left to right, and not worry about going from front rotate or all the way around to the back, you can add multiple, like say this guy was wearing a watch on his right hand, you would also put a watch on his left hand, and then you can turn off that drawing if you happen to flip your character. So that's another way to kind of get around doing like a full 360 rotation as well. But this is not to say that you shouldn't put in the extra work, because it is important, but there are shortcuts that you can take in order to get the rig completed in time for animation to actually have something to use.
Right. So just to talk back to what you mentioned about if he was wearing a watch on one hand, you would have two drawings of a watch on either wrist and then turn it off when you're animating. Are there any other tips and tricks that you could share with us when kind of making a 180 rig stretch?
Yeah, so I would say it will be more so down to actually rigging doing the hierarchy yourself, itself rather. So we'll look at our rig hierarchy here. So we can see that this is a very simple rig hierarchy. I have seen some that I would have to zoom out to maybe like this distance to see exactly all of the stuff that makes up the rig. But I wanted to keep things simple and not very scary for our viewers here, so we have a very simple rig right here. Now, what I did in several cases here for our character is I only rigged one part or one side of the drawing of the character because I knew that it's symmetrical and all I have to do is flip it over to the other side. So
Mhm.
I created one eye and then I cloned it to create the other one. And then I used what's known as the static transformation node here to place it in the right position. So if I was to get rid of this thing,
And just be a one-eyed guy.
yep,
Mhm.
but it's actually he actually has two eyes because it's just cloned,
Magic.
right? So with the static transformation, how you go ahead and use this is that you actually have to create another peg here above the peg that you copied, and
Mhm.
then you can hit 4 on your keyboard, and then all you have to do is kind of shift that to the position that you want it to be in. Then you can grab your static transformation, plug it in underneath that peg that you used to make your movement, go into the layer properties and say bake immediate parents transformation. So the immediate parent of the static transformation node would be that peg. So I just bake that information or that peg movement. And then when I get rid of that peg, my I will stay in the position that I need it to be in.
Hmm.
And I did this for the eye, and I did this for the arm and legs as well. Now, this is something that I do very often, but it is important to note that let's undo all that stuff that I just did and to make sure that everything works how it's supposed to. There you go. So yeah, you don't want to be like abusing this option either, because it is very helpful to have or to build your characters assets in the position that they're in on the actual design. Um, this method here that I showed you just now helps you get the rig finished, because generally the arms and the legs and the eyes will be, you know, mirror images of each other. And it's
Mhm.
a great way to go ahead and just quickly get the different limbs of your character built. So general practice would be to use this the static transformation on eyes or on the limbs of your character.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were looking at the deformers as well. Very quickly, we'll have a look at the deformer I added to this arm here. So this is a curved deformer. So this will allow me to go ahead and bend
Hey,
my
another
arm
arm.
here. And then I can go ahead and move my character's hand here and
Oh,
reposition it. Uh, there you go. So we can get a really nice, you know, Looney Toony noodle arm.
rubber
Um,
hose style.
there you go. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, there you go, rubber hose.
Yeah.
And the other type of deformer, I can't remember if I did a form. No,
Oh.
I did another curve here. So what we'll do is we'll actually add another transformation um, chain here. And let's find that drawing, shall we? And we will grab our rigging tool and we will create a bone deformer here on this arm, just so that you can see what the bone deformer looks like. So creating a bone deformer is you click to set your offset, you click again to create your articulation point, and then you finalize it there at the wrist. So once you have created your bone deformer, now you can get a more kind of realistic bend in your arm instead of that kind of rubber hosey look that I just showed you. And you can use the deformer to move around your character's arm as well that way too. So for this rig though, I wanted to have my um, nice little rubber hose arms for each character. So let's actually look at creating the turnaround for this character. So
Yes.
when you are doing your turnaround, first thing you want to do is I like to have my reference material sitting over top of my character, and then I will go ahead and lock that um, artwork so that I don't accidentally click on it and move it while I'm doing my turnaround. Now I have my first keyframe here that has been set, and then I'll create another keyframe for my quarter front view. Now at this point, this is where we have to start moving stuff around on our rig. Now, first thing that you're going to want to do is I like to start with the head, or the face rather. So what you have to do is you have to go up to the face peg, and then go into my rig here so that you can see right here. So my face master peg here is connecting the mouth and the two eyes, so I can move all of those around at the same time. And then from here, what I'll be doing is I'll be shifting things over into position that I can see here on my um, reference material. From this point, you have to start with, always remember to start with the master control, master peg for any specific group. So in this case, it'll be the master peg for the face. And then for the arm, I would go up to the top of that arm here. Come down, go to the top. There we go. And then I like to add a little rotation, but first I'll go across one and then I'll add a little rotation to it. And as you
Mm,
can see, this is behind the
torso.
body torso here.
Yeah.
So what we do at this point is we use our coordinate toolbar here, and we will be adding some, or pushing this forward on our character. So I usually like to add 0, 0, 1, and then if I hit enter here, you can see that it pops in front of my character's body. So this is now layered in Z depth ahead of everything else on my character. So at this point, what it will also do is I'm going to add a little deformation to my sleeve here,
Hmm.
and I'm going to start moving, deforming my other shapes here to fit the new look to
Mm.
the uh, material. So the reference material. So you can see that I've had added quite a few deformers here to my character. And that allows me to actually go ahead and deform the drawings to match the new look of the character. So
We
if the
have a
head shape
question
wasn't
from Marsha.
symmetrical, what's that,
Sorry.
this?
No, I was saying we have a question from Marsha B. Start here
Yeah.
reading it.
Oh, cool. If the head shape wasn't symmetrical, would you start shifting from the master head peg instead of the face?
Hmm.
Um, so if the head wasn't symmetrical, chances are the head is going to be broken down into the different pieces, in which case the head is still going to be attached to the neck, right, Marcia? So you're not going to necessarily have to move the head like over, unless
Mhm.
you're rigging the character's head is like on a really long neck, and it has to like do this big arc rotation when it rotates, in which case, yeah, you would start at the head first. So you would go up to your head master peg, and then you would shift your head over to wherever it needs to be, and then you would shift your face over and do the rotation that way. So that's actually a very good point. If this character had like a really long neck, and you would start seeing it here at the quarter front view, that's what you
Mhm.
would have to do first. You have to shift the head over and then shift the face information. So that's how you work. You start at the top, and then you come down your hierarchy and on the other smaller portions of your character to adjust them. So let's go ahead and do some more shifting here. So with this arm, I don't actually have to do that much shifting. Come down here. Bring this back, and we'll add a little bit of rotation here as well. And when you're doing your rotations, we don't like tangents, so you don't want to have something that looks like this on your rotation. This is a big no-no in animation. So you want to make sure that you shift things back so you have a nice little cut like that. And then in this case, I need to actually push this behind my body. And this is where trial and error comes in. So I'm going to put 001 B here to shift it back. And there we go. And then I'm going to use this deformer here to adjust the shoulder as well, just like that. And let's see if this cutter will work here. Yeah, okay. So we actually have to move this back as well. So this is where all that messing around comes in. So we're going to add 001 B here also, so that we can get rid of that pesky line that we were seeing just now. So we'll go ahead and just clean up that there. And when you're adding your increments here on your Z line, you don't want to add like very large increments, like say 1, because what will happen when you start moving your camera is things are going to start like shifting apart, because
Yeah,
some
so it
things
kind
will
of
be
goes from being like this to like this almost.
yeah, exactly. So you have to pay attention to how much you're actually moving your stuff. Now, I actually want to turn on my sketch here to make sure that I'm following my thing properly. So as you can see, um, let's actually disable this. And we're going to follow the sketch that I created. So I actually want this to shift over a bit more. And then I'm going to deform it more as well. Like this here. And then where is it? Oh, come on. Let's lock Q2. Here we go. That's good. You want to move you back a little bit here. Shift this around. And we also have to do some work on our sleeve as well. And we need to add a little curve here also. And at any point during this process here, it's always good to go ahead, come down on your timeline, add some distance between your keys, and then actually just see how that rotation is working. So that looks pretty decent already. Right?
Yeah. So the interpolation is basically what kind of adds that additional sense of movement to the 360 to take you from the turnarounds, is the static turnarounds, to an actual kind of smooth rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's work on the body here, because that was looking a little too rough. So we need to bring our two still. Add this here like that. Yeah, that's pretty okay there. Once again, you can just test it. And as I said, this you have to do a little bit of trial and error when you're doing your turnarounds, just to make sure that everything is turning exactly how you want it. So in this case, I might want to push this curve a little bit more here. Let's disable that again. Yeah, that looks a little better. I can bring this out a bit more here, though.
Remember, no tangents.
Yeah,
So
no
look, you're
tangents.
starting to get one.
Yeah.
Base of the shirt there.
Yep. And we have one going on here, but that leg is going to move in a second, so that's fine.
What are these red circles?
Oh, those are handy dandy. I call them OGL controllers. So those can act as, if you click it, it'll actually select something that you can't actually see. So I actually have a cutter here for cutting away that line.
Okay.
And I normally wouldn't be able to see it. But with the OGL control. This is actually a new feature with Harmony 22 as well. Um, we have another option of creating handles like you see here. I have a
Mhm.
cutter here for this line. So I created the handle here. And what I did is I added a visibility node to it so that it will only be visible in the OpenGL view, which you're seeing
Mm.
right here. And then when I go into my render view, you're not actually going to see that little dot. So that's just a handle that I created for that specific cutter. But with the OGL controllers, I don't actually have to create
The
the
visibility node.
yeah, I can just add a OGL controller to it, and in the render view, there is actually no way to render out an OGL controller, so you'll never see it. So that's another handy tool that you can use when you're rigging as well. I was very happy about that when I saw it come out with 22. So
Yeah, because I was like, I don't remember seeing those earlier. Where did they come from? So I
I
know we've been working a lot on the, sorry to interrupt, on the
go ahead.
shirt, but I am
Mhm.
curious about the face.
The face. All right, let's look at the face. Let's go back to our thing here. So Um, here is where we can now actually do some like squash and stretch and skewing to our eyes here. There are cases where you would add a deformer around the eye and actually deform it to fit the different view.
Mhm.
But you can also just do your nice little you know squash here, and I will just shift this eye over a little bit. And this is where I'm talking about. You should start at the top first and then
Mhm.
come down to the different parts of uh, your hierarchy. So at this point, then I'm going to want to skew the eye it by itself. And I also want to skew this a little bit here. Also, then I will move this down or move this across actually here. So, and then we can swap between our two drawings here to make sure that things are looking pretty decent. I actually want to maybe, we'll go against the turnaround here actually, and then shift that over a little bit, shift the eye pupil as well. And with the mouth, in the cases of mouths, you can either do a little squash and stretch here as well. But generally speaking, what I would suggest for simple characters like this, I would do different mouth substitution. So with your drawings, you can have multiple different drawings within it. So actually on my mouth drawing here, we have a handy drawing substitution tab where we can see all the different drawings on that particular drawing node. So you can think of your drawing node as a little flip book that you have several different drawings that you can animate on that particular drawing. So you can have like say 500 frames of animation on one drawing very, very easily. But in situations like this, I would want to say maybe have another set of quarter-front mouths for my
Mhm.
character here instead of like squashing this mouth. But because this is a simple rig, we're just going to squash it a little bit
So
here.
this one shot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we can just start looking to see how that looks as well.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, when you start to come around the corner here, since it's going further away, you're going to maybe want to shrink it a little bit. Also, maybe shift it up on the head here a bit. I'll just move and see how that looks. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. I actually want to shift it over a little bit more. Oops, let's go up to the master peg here. Shift this over. The eyelashes need to come around.
Mhm.
All right, we're coming together. And then the head shape is changing a bit too. Um,
Mhm.
we have a deformer on the head, so we can shift this down a bit, shift this up here, maybe pull it in
Yeah.
a little.
So now that we're kind of beginning to see the in-betweens between the in-betweens between, now that we're beginning to see the additional positions between the full frontal view and any three-quarter view, and we're kind of thinking about how the eye would look as the head and body kind of shift gradually from screen, I guess, screen front to screen left. I'm kind of coming back to Francis's question about understanding anatomy. Perhaps not anatomy per se, that's not the word I would use, but definitely having a solid understanding of how everybody connects to everybody else.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, obviously you would be building on the character turnaround, but for the in-between frames, which is what you're working on now, you would definitely have to have some understanding of, okay, if I'm halfway between like full frontal and three-quarter front, I have to have an understanding of like what the features are going to look like in this position versus this position versus this position.
Yeah. And the other thing that you should kind of think about as well is when you're looking at your character here, our character here, whoops, we can see very clearly that she has, or he has, a round head, right? Or well, it's more of an egg. But anyway, it has a curve to it. So you have to think about all three dimensions as well when you're doing your 360 rig, because when something goes around on a curve, it's going to get smaller as it shifts behind around it, right? So you have to consider that as well. And when things go further away from the camera, they're going to get smaller generally. So that's another thing that you should think about.
Perspective. So we've got a question here from Julius. So he's wondering how to integrate or synchronize dialogue and soundtrack so that you can arrange the various character movements, or is he getting ahead of himself? So the script or storyboard may not call for a specific range of motion or characteristics that the rigger may have designed.
So integrating dialogue and soundtrack so that you can arrange various character movements. I would say you're maybe getting a little ahead of yourself, but at the same time, yeah, that will come more down to like the animation side of things. Generally, when you're rigging, you're really looking at the movements of the character versus how the character is moving towards a soundtrack or dialogue, because at that point, it's the animator that's going to be timing out the animation to match that dialogue or soundtrack. So my job, or the rigger's job, will be make sure that the animator has the flexibility with the rig to do the movements that need to be done to synchronize it to the dialogue or the soundtrack. I can see at a point here you do have to consider how you rig as well, because if you're thinking about like mouth shapes, for example, I was talking about squashing the mouth. You might want to, in that case, say, okay, we're not going to squash the mouth, or we have to actually build a more complicated mouth with deformers and different pieces for teeth and that kind of thing, where you can actually deform a mouth shape into the different mouth positions to get your dialogue out for your rotation. So again, you can see how complicated or complex it can get in thinking when you're actually building, because there are a lot of different things that you have to consider. But that is a decent question in terms of synchronizing to a dialogue, because when it comes to lip sync for 360 rigs, you might want to, as I said, think of either using like drawing subs, as I mentioned before, or actually creating a very complicated mouth setup so in that case, to create the actual mouth shapes themselves. Yeah, so I'm just going to try and finish up this little guy's feet here. So that I want to actually give you all a look at a rig that I had completed previously, a 360 rig. what that would look like with master controllers and such. So we actually do have a tail on this guy. I did not add the OGL controller for it, but he is here, and I actually did not
Ooh,
set my pivot either.
oh my
So this
goodness.
is a good point to say, like, you really should check your rigs, guys. So this pivot point should not be there. You should be down here. And we actually want this tail to be more at,
Where tails are supposed to be.
yeah, down here as well. And we have a deformer on it though, so we can actually deform the tail into a nice little curve here. And we're going to have to move it. Actually, let's move that up there. And then we'll move it and give it a little bit of rotation. Anything else? That's okay. And then let's check to see. Oh, look, his tail is coming out from behind him.
Hey.
Awesome. And you can see that I did do a little movement on the legs here. I did add deformers on the feet so that I can show them rotating as well. Now on the back leg here, what I might do also is just move it up a little bit as well, to kind of, because it's shift going further in the background, so you want to actually have it move back a bit as well. Maybe add a little bit more point to this foot here.
Mm-hmm.
And oops, made it in the wrong place. Right. So we can see how that's starting to come together. We also have to do some stuff with his little horns here. So we have to bring this guy forward. We need to shift these across here because there are three of them. We'll bring this guy forward here, and we're going to bring him forward as well. And
Not
then,
that far forward.
yeah, but that is kind of like one of the smallest increments that you can bring it forward. So we're going to have to work with it.
Oh dear.
Just bring the eye forward, and then we're going to have to shift this here a little. And 360 rigs will tend to have some instances of popping in terms of things coming in front of other things, and that's totally fine because it's not a perfect system. You can absolutely get a really good looking one where everything like shifts and moves and you're not going to see any popping, but the general thing is that you want the animators to have the option to kind of get like a foundation of movement for the different pieces, so you don't necessarily have to have everything in a very particular spot. So
you would go through this process again, because this is very easy to visualize when you're going from, again, full front to 3/4 front. But then when you're doing a view, say transitioning from 3/4 back, going through like the full back view,
yeah,
and then coming back out, you're still doing this whole process of nudging things backwards and forwards in space.
yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And one of the things that I would say is, like, if you're moving from um, from profile to quarterback, let's actually have a look at the other example here. So you can get a basic understanding, I hope, of what you should be doing. So where you're doing your rotation, you start with the topmost peg, the master peg that controls the main group that you want to move around. And then you come down to the smaller, more individual pieces of that peg group. And then you start positioning, rotating, adjusting your deformers and such to meet the reference material. And then you can end up with something that looks pretty decent. Let's get rid of our reference material there. And you can see we're actually starting to have something that looks pretty cool here. All right. Now we can have a look at another option here in the last few minutes of our little workshop.
Yeah, we may have to go a little bit over time if that's okay with you and our
Yeah.
participants. Because
Absolutely.
I am very curious to see how the master controller fits into all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
So I need to open this one. This one has a master controller in it as well.
a oh
Awesome.
my
So
goodness.
this is a little otter dude here that I built for my animation team. And we can already see on my timeline here, we have quite a few
Keyframes,
keyframes
yes.
for that turnaround, right? So what I will do here
Oh my
is I will
goodness.
just show you all of the different iterations for
Your little
my otter here,
microwave turn.
all right? And added a flip peg as well because I only did from front to back in one direction. I added the
Mm.
flip here so I can go in the other direction, right? Now the
So,
tail obviously will, have that big flip there, but that's fine. Look, he's wagging his tail. Yay. Right? So when it came to actually moving from the say we're going from what's this quarter front view to
mhm.
our profile view, we can see that on my timeline here, I have quite a few keys where the eye is still visible, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, boop, it disappears. Right?
Yes.
So what you're doing, you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Maybe let's select it here. Oops, wrong button. Um, like squashing it to the very last moment before it actually goes around the head, and then at which point it doesn't really matter because in animation there are also going to be different, you know, frames where things are going to be happening very quickly, so you're not actually going to catch stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there might not be a case where you actually have to have your character like moving around so slowly, but even then at that point, you're unless you're a trained animator like myself, um, you're not going to be looking for it, actively looking for it. The average viewer is not going to catch stuff like that. But definitely when you're doing a 360 rig, you want to kind of just make sure that you can get as much rotation as you can before things start to move behind. And
Mhm.
I can show you here the amount of deformers that this guy has,
Oh my God.
right? Because I needed that flexibility and to be able to, push and deform my drawings. And you can see
Mhm.
even on the cheek there exactly what's happening. So even though like that cheek shape is not being seen, I'm
Mhm.
still actually still deforming it because I want
Mm.
it to get to a good shape where it's just sitting just outside of my head shape, but it deforms properly still. Whoops, I'm looking back. So that's another thing that you have to be aware of when you're doing your 360 rigs is that how things are actually deforming as they rotate. Because you don't want to say in a case where you're moving from your what's this, the profile to the quarterback, where you would say just grab your sheet shape here and then just like pull
You
it
could
all
do
the way
whatever you
over
want.
here,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my
You have
goodness.
to be very vigilant
Mm.
of what uh, is actually happening in the rotation. And once again, here's another example. Let's get rid of those because it can be very distracting. Where the cheek will
Mm.
disappear at the very last moment there, right?
Yeah. So in
Um,
the chat, for anyone who's interested, there is a link to the episode that this particular rig was used in. And credit has been given to Alex as the designer, sorry, and the rigger of the adorable otter that you see before you. I
yeah.
need this as a plush toy. So
Please
Julia,
guys.
Julia says, please tell me there's a shortcut for multiplying deformers that you can edit at will.
So the good news is that if you have um, a case like on the arms, for example, like I was showing you, that I actually like in this case, too, I just created one arm and duplicated it or cloned it and shifted it over. So any of the deformers that you create on one side will be copied to the other. So you don't actually have to like sit down and say, okay, I have to draw a deformer on this arm, and then I have to go over on this arm and add another deformer. Of course, if you want to be very meticulous,
Mhm.
you can go ahead and you know, do that. But there are cases where, like I said, there are shortcuts to everything.
Mm.
Well, to most things. So you will be able to, you know, duplicate your deformers as well. And there was one other thing that I wanted to mention. What was it? Slipped my mind.
Oh, well,
Um,
if it slipped your mind,
yeah,
then I will also remind you that I am very curious about the master controller and how that fits
that's
into
right.
to all of
That
this.
was it. It was something to do with
Ha!
master controller.
Excellent.
So, also on my timeline here, we have all of the different head tilts for our character.
Oh, it is.
So he's looking up, looking down, and I'm going to tell you this was a lot of work because I had to try and figure out what this character would look like in all of these different up and down positions. I find this hilarious.
So, a question relating to the master controller. Well, first of all, I'll allow you to explain what a master controller is.
Yep.
Um, but this is a question that I guess I kind of had when we were going through the head turning and so on
Mhm.
with Mez. Is that his name?
Yep. Mhm.
Would it be beneficial to have like a head turn reference sheet when rigging, or is that overkill?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I would have loved to have a head turn reference for this guy because I had to go ahead and, like I said, I had to try and figure out. I looked up references of authors, like whether it be
Watching all
like
the cute
real
videos and
life or
yeah.
other drawings of others to see what how people handled the the top down view of the head and that kind of stuff to
Mm,
come up with the um, tilts that you see here. This
mhm,
one was one of the more difficult ones. And you're going to see that actually as I scrub here, I actually made a mistake here in the otter because right here, when he's looking up, he has a lot of cheek going on here. But in the next view, doesn't really have that much. And even
mm.
here, he should have a lot more like happening down here, perhaps, you know? But for the purposes of the show, it wasn't that necessary. They were able to work with, you know, what I gave them. And that's the other thing when you're rigging. You have to kind of chat with the producers and the supervisors to find out exactly how far you need to push your rig. Um,
Mm,
um, so like you don't want to do, you know, extra work if you don't need to do the
true.
extra
Yeah,
work.
that's
All right.
true.
So master controllers, let's talk about those. Now,
Yes. What are
I
they?
I will show you what the master controllers do in the attempt to explain what the master controllers do. So it's also in the name as well. So the master controller means that it's a controller that handles or is responsible for moving several different pieces of
Mm,
the rig at the same time, which will allow you a quick way to close out your character.
mm,
Now, this guy has two types of master controllers. He has a slider and he has a head master controller for the head tilt. So in order to see the master controllers, you have to click on this button here, show
mhm.
master controllers, and it'll
Yeah.
bring up this little window here to show the
Let's
different
see
master
it.
controllers that we have. So we'll start with the turnaround master controller, which is a slider. So I can turn that on. And here we have it down here at the bottom. So when using the master controller, you'll be able to use your slider here to rotate your character. And you can see when I'm rotating very quickly, it actually looks like a very decent, you know, turnaround. You're not actually seeing all of those different little um, weird things, but we do
Mm.
have a flip
Oh,
right here in the middle, you know, but once again,
God.
you're not going to be seeing that when you're animating because you're going to choose like a spot on the um, master controller, and once you do select that spot, you're actually going to be creating a keyframe on your timeline. You can move down on the next frame, and it will create another keyframe, which will then allow you to in between the two different poses for your character, or different views rather. Now let's have a look at the head master controller. So we'll go back here, show master controllers. We'll turn off that one and turn on the head master controller. And the head master controller is right here.
Interesting.
So what this allows me to do is it allows me to control my head. And there is some popping going on here because it's not a perfect one. But once again, the animators were able to use this to kind of get the different poses very quickly as well. So, right? Yes, absolutely. It's a great master controller. So when you're setting up your master controller or creating your master controller, you're going to have to put in the blood, sweat, and tears and create all of these keyframes here for your master controller, just to make sure that everything is shifting properly. Now, when you are creating your master controller, and thanks for being here, Francis. I hope you have a good night too. To create a head master controller like this, you're going to be using your grid wizard right here. And then once you're here, you have to decide like how many grid parts you want for your controller. So you have some options here. You can see that we have a 180-degree turnaround, which is 9x3, or you can have like a 180 mirrored, which is 3x10 or 10x3. So you can choose which one you want. If I wanted, let's say, let's go 9x3, and I hit OK. So now we have this, which is actually the one that I used for this one here. So once you've done all of your work here on your timeline, what you're going to be doing after you open up your grid wizard is you're going to be looking here on your timeline. And this is the reason why I added these little markers here on my timeline. So I know that this is the front view, the quarter front view, the profile, the quarter back, profile, quarter front. Right.
So each of these red dots and then grid wizard corresponds to a different keyframe then?
Yes, absolutely. So what you'll be doing is you'll be assigning your keyframes to these different dots here, right? So on the main x-axis here, the one here in the middle, this is where you're going to do your side-to-side rotation. So on that axis, so you'll be looking from front, turning to profile. So here at the middle, you'll have your front view, then you'll have your quarter front, your profile, your quarterback, and then your back. And then you'll repeat that on the other side. So you'll generally click on one of the little red dots there, and then you'll input the corresponding frame number that you want for that particular point on your master controller. And then it's not going to be a case, of course, you see that we only have limited number of grid points here. So what you'll be doing is on your, say, your quarter front one here, you're going to just put the, like, it'll be frame 20 in this case. You're not going to add any of the ones in between here, because when you have finished creating your master controller, what's happening between these 2 points is the master controller is going to be referencing the animation or the posing that you did in between those 2 points without you having to actually input them there on the master controller itself. So once you have done all of that, you've plotted all of your keyframes, and on the top here, got to mention, so you can consider this the x-axis now, the different like up and down tilts. So in the middle here, you'll have your front view, and then you'll have your front view looking up, and then your front view looking down. You'll have your quarter front looking up and quarter front looking down keyframe, and then you'll keep plotting out your controller that way. Once you're done, you'll hit create, and it will create this handy little master controller here for you, where you can go ahead and use it to do all of your different, get all of your different poses. And to let you know, one of the main uses for like a head master controller, beyond the ability to, you know, very quickly get a head position for your character, is shows have a specific style for how a character should look in the different
Mm,
positions that it's in. So you mentioned having a, you know, head tilt reference, which will be
mhm,
absolutely great because you know that when the person designed them, it went to the creator or the director to say, yes, this character is still on model. This is how
mm,
it's supposed to look. And then that is handed to the rigger, like myself, where I would then use those head tilt information to plot out the different tilts for my character's head, knowing that that's how the character is supposed to look.
mm,
So there are cases where um, you know, animators might not be as experienced or skilled in being
mhm,
able to replicate how the character should look at a different angle. So having the master controller will allow the animators to hit that
mhm.
pose without having to worry about whether the character is on model or not. Right.
And
So
for those of us who are a little rusty on our lingo, on model is basically the same as being on brand. So you want to make sure that the character, so the studio, the producers, whoever, they've agreed that this is what a character looks like at all the different angles, and we don't really deviate from that because being off model is essentially being off brand,
yeah,
for lack of a better word.
yeah, absolutely. Um, So using the master controllers as well, just so you know, you're not like restricted to just using the master controllers once they've been set up. They're just a tool to help you get
Mhm.
different plot keyframes on your timeline, and then from there, once you have that keyframe, you can then go right back to using you know, your regular rig hierarchy, you know,
Mhm.
to pose out your character,
It's so
right?
cute.
So yeah, you can talk to Ocean Explorers about getting some merch, you know, on that,
Yeah,
right?
I'll find Ocean Explorers merch money.
Right. So yeah, so that's just I want to give you a look at the master controllers there. Um, are there any questions about what anyone has seen here today? Feel free to shoot them in the chat.
Yes.
Um,
I know
or if you want,
we've covered quite a lot of information. Do feel free to put questions in the chat. It's not just me and Alex talking back and forth at each other till the end of time. Um, but yeah, so this is pretty interesting stuff. I think because I've been familiar with master controllers, but I've never really gone through the process of setting one up.
mhm,
Uh, so you said that you have the slider, which kind of allows you to do the. Oh, and Marsha has a question. Can you go over how to set up an OGL? And please
absolutely
also clarify what an OGL is.
no problem. I'll just turn on the slider here for you.
Yes.
So yeah, I like personally the slider. The situations where the slider would be used would be for a situation like this where you want to.
Mhm.
It
Oh,
says in the opposite direction.
oh my
Let's
goodness.
let's turn off that.
Exorcist author.
Yeah, let's actually see what we can do here. We turn off the master of the head. Is it still not work? Yeah,
Oh,
don't worry. He still works properly. There we go.
hey.
Yeah, yeah. So the slider is usually one of the uses for it is for turnarounds. So you can very
Mhm.
easily and quickly get your turnarounds here. You can also use sliders for setting up like blink animations as well, or to cycle through the different mouth
Rotate.
substitutions. Um,
Mm.
also, if you have a simple like head rotation, if it's just going like you said, like an exorcist, you can also just use the slider for that. The other grid master controllers, those can be used for, as you saw, like head tilts. They
Mhm.
can also be used for if you have like very complicated mouth, you can have one where it will um, morph from like a happy into a sad without actually
Mm.
having to go ahead and deform it yourself into those different
Mm.
positions. Once again, that
Okay.
will come to, you know, the the discussion about being on model, right? Everybody will every character will have their own unique mouth
Yeah.
set that it'll look. So a master controller, grid master controller will be a good example where to use that as well. So let's look at how to set up the master controllers, the not master controllers,
The OGL.
OGL controllers here.
And explain what the OGL is for heathens like myself who forget the terminology very often.
No problem. Now, I cannot remember off the top of my head what OGL stands for, but I just know that it is something, it's basically a handle to select things that can't be seen when you have completed a rig. So setting up the audio controller, I'll actually create a new ones here for this character. So let's find it here. Oh no, it's on the outside. Put them here. Here we go. So I'm just going to get rid of them. Here we go. So we want OGL controllers. They can be found in your node library here. I can search for OGL controller. Looks like a little controller, doesn't it? And then I can just drag and drop it into my node view here. Once I do that, I have to plug it in. And then I'll go into my layer properties here where I enter setup mode so I can actually see where my controller is. And from your layer properties, you can actually decide if you want a particular shape. So if you want a circle or a square or a diamond, maybe. Let's go with diamond. Actually, no. Yeah, let's go with diamond. My favorite is a donut because who doesn't like donuts, right?
That's true. That's true.
So we'll go with a diamond. We can change the color if you want. So let's go to this nifty purple color here. And then we can choose the size of it. So if you wanted it ridiculously large, we can have it.
Oh my God.
And if you want it, kind of more
a little bit more
discreet size, you know, you can have it there. And then within setup mode, we can then shift it to the position that we want it to be at, right? So let's say we want it right here. Then we can go to our label. We can add some text here. So if we want to call this cutter control, let's see, how do you spell control? There we go. Control. Let's say screen left cutter control. Right? We can add that, and we can have it in the same color as our cutter here. We can also get rid of the background box, but then in setup mode, we can also move that around and just put it down here. Right? From here now, what we need to do is we need to go to our selection tab. So we want to actually point that controller to the drawing or the peg that we want it to select, right? So we can go into our node view here, and I want it to select this particular cutter or peg. So once I have selected the peg here, all I have to do is click on use selected node, and it will reference that peg there. So it doesn't have to be a peg. If I wanted to say have a OGL to select a mouth drawing, if I want to quickly go through my my drawing subs, I can say just select the drawing itself, use that node, and you can see it will reference the actual drawing itself. So I want it to reference the cutter. And then we also have this controller visibility, right? So if I base it on selection, then I can say I only want to see that OGL controller when, let's say, the upper leg is selected, right? So if let's see, if I turn off, where is it? It's up here. Let's see if I go up of setup mode here. And there we go. So if I don't have the selected the upper leg, I'm not actually going to see my audio controller. So that's another nice way of not having, if you have a character has 16 billion of them all over the place, you can hide them until you actually select the drawing that's closest to it, or the the peg that's closest to it. And
Okay.
then once I have it set up there, I can select that, and then I can I will select the thing that I want to move around. So it's a very great way to be able to select things without actually having to. I can show you the process of creating your um, regular controllers. So if I wanted to, like how, not controllers, handles, like
Mm-hmm.
we did in the old days.
Ye
Um,
olden days.
so here we have our shoulder cutter, and I'm using this to cut away the line of my torso here so that I can get a nice little, look to my torso,
Mm-hmm.
um, or like a little crease here. So what I did is on this cutter, I went to, and if I go into my drawing here, you can see that on my line art, I have the shape that I want to use to cut my line with. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the overlay, I have another little circle, which is the handle that I want to use to select it, right? Now, show this before, but now I have plugged, I have two of them. So I plugged those both into a composite here. And then I use my isolation node here for the overlay to only show the overlays. And then
Mm-hmm.
I add my visibility node here and make sure that I uncheck soft render, because the soft render is indicating this view here. So this will be considered a soft render. So this is just a quick look to see how things will look when you export it. But we only want to see our handles here in the OpenGL view. So we have to make sure to uncheck that so that when we go to render, those things won't actually show up.
Mm-hmm.
The OGL controller allows you to skip all of that and just very easily and quickly add a handle to your parts of your rig and
Mm-hmm.
not have them actually render out on export. As I said, there's no way to actually render out an OGL controller. So that's what actually makes them very, very handy. And you can even attach them if you wanted to the peg that they're controlling. Where'd it go? I lost it. Where are you, buddy? There you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I can actually connect this to that particular peg that I'm controlling. So when I move that thing around, the OGL will go with it. Personally, I don't necessarily like that. I rather the OGL stay where it is, but you have that option as well. The other thing that you can do with OGL controllers is you can actually create drawings to represent the controllers themselves. So if I wanted to, I can add a drawing here, and I can plug it into my OGL controller. And I'll just plug it into the composite here so I can actually create the drawing. And let's say,
We're seeing all his
um,
insights now.
yeah, let's have a little
That's
smiley
smiley
face.
face.
Yeah, smiley face. And we're going to, let's just make sure that everything is closed up.
Yes.
And we'll just fill this with some, nifty, like this red color. Why not? And from here now, if I go back into my OGL controller, I can go back to here and I can reduce this alpha all the way down to 0 so that I can actually see the drawing that I created for it.
Hey.
So I can use that drawing. You can customize your own OGL controllers as well with creating your own drawing. And once again, it's not going to render out. So you can have your fun with it. Cases like the face, what I would sometimes do is like select all the drawings of the face and they have it in a like lighter color and then all of the like a light blue and then all of
Mhm.
the areas that the OGL controller is referencing, I will put in red so that you know, like, okay, if you see the face and the eyes and the eyebrows and the mouth are red, then I know like that's the face OGL controller, and it will reference that face peg for me to go ahead and move it around. So
Mm.
that's how easy it is to set up OGL controllers.
Okay.
So
And
very handy tool.
I do also want to point out when you lost your little buddy earlier, it
Yep.
reminded me the importance of a very tidy node view. Because
Yes.
as you can see, this is probably one of the least complicated rigs I've seen in quite some time.
Yep.
And there's still quite a lot going on there because obviously you're doing a lot of head bone connected to neck bone, shoulder bone connected to wherever
Yep.
business. So when you start thinking of putting the foot to the calf and the calf to the thigh, and then the thigh goes into like the hip or the torso or whatever, all of these nodes, the drawings, the pegs, they all indicate the relationship between the different parts.
Yep.
So it's very important to make sure that your hierarchy
It's
is
tidy.
yeah.
And you can actually, we do have a little handy tool here that right here at the top, which is if it hovers over it for an up move. Come on, buddy. Ah,
Shy.
here. Align nodes horizontally, right?
Mm.
So what I can do is I can select a group of nodes here and then click that button and it will snap it into a nice straight line for me. And so I can build a nice clean rig. I can also add these little, they're called backdrops to specific areas. So anything that's within that backdrop will move together when you move that backdrop around. You can add that to a shortcut. So I have one for myself, so I can quickly add a backdrop to my node view here. And then you can go ahead and add funky colors to it. You can also label it as you see here. We'll call this body.
Body.
Right. And then that way, like at a quick glance, you can see, okay, so all my head stuff is over here, all my lower body stuff is here, and all my main body stuff is here. So that's another way that you can very easily organize your node view as well to keep it nice and tidy and clean. And just quickly, if you want to add your create backdrops, you can go to your keyboard shortcuts. You can look, let's see, let's put in backdrop instead. Back, where are you? Backdrop. There it is. Your node view, you have create backdrop, and then you have that little button right next to the number 1 on your keyboard. So I just add that very quickly to add my backdrops to my node view there. So yeah, and the keeping your node view is clean is important as well, because you might not be the one that's going to have to do the revisions for your rig. You might be given to someone else to do the revisions, and then you don't want that person to have to be like sitting down looking at it for like a half hour trying to figure out what's connected to what. So it's very important to have things sectioned out like this, have things nicely lined up and labeled. Another important thing.
The labeling is very important because I will speak for myself. I do have a bad habit of saving a file, file name final, file name final 1, file name final 5. So definitely having a system that you or someone else can follow. Obviously, if you're working in a one-man band, you may be inclined to fall into bad habits, but I'd encourage you not to.
Yep, absolutely. No one likes when you have an untidy node view.
Yes.
And
so I think he's very smug looking here. So I think we've covered a lot of information. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on in relation to the 360 that you think is like essential knowledge that we should take away from?
Patience. When you're building your 360 rig, you have to be patient with it, because it is going to be a lot of work that you're going to have to put in. So make sure that you take the time to sit down with the character design and the reference material and the animation, the animatic or the storyboard, and actually go through it thoroughly to make sure that you can see exactly how flexible or not flexible you can make your rig. And then take the time with the designs as well, like you saw me do with having my different sketches here to make sure things rotating how they're supposed to be as well. That's very good practice. Whether it be doing an actual 360 rig or just a simple like front view rig, it's always important to make sure that things are looking correct. Drawing through is also important. So you can see that right here, my torso is behind the head. So if I was to move or disable that, you can actually see that my torso is complete, because you don't want to end up doing something where you do your torso shape and it looks just like that, because when you move the head, you're going to have an incomplete torso, right? And it's going to look weird. So it's always important when you're doing your rigs to make sure you draw through all of the different parts that you are working with. As you can see right now, we're having my light table turned on. You can see exactly how this rig is broken down. So my arm is drawn through and under my sleeve. My legs go up into the waist, drawing here as well. That would pretty much cover like just being, I don't want to say meticulous. I don't use the word meticulous, but I'll use it anyway. Just be meticulous with your preparations before you actually get started, because there's nothing worse than getting like 80% through a rig and then realizing, oh wait, I have to add another drawing to make this thing actually work the way it needs to work. So take the time to sit down with the character design, do your little sketches, draw it out on a different drawing, so that you can actually see exactly, plan out your rig that way. And then when you're doing your 360, important when you're moving stuff around, start at the very top most peg, and then come down to the smaller iterations of that peg group to move and deform your drawings to get your 360 turnaround of that. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers kind of like the basic advanced stuff that you have to bear in mind when
Yeah.
you're doing your character rig, 360 rig. But from this point, it's just a case of going and doing it and testing it yourself. And what I showed you is what I do personally. It's not what you should do. Like
It's not the only way to do things, but it's a good foundation to build off of.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, thanks for sitting in with me and listening to what I had to show you. And I'm sure if there are any other questions like afterwards, you can probably shoot them at Jess, and you can let me know, and I can get the answers for you. So
yes,
yeah,
rigging is not my specialty, but I know a guy who knows some stuff. That's you, Alex. You're the guy who knows some stuff.
Yes.
So thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for sharing your information, because I certainly learned a fair amount. I hope the others were able to learn something as well. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Again, this has been Rigging in 360 with, primarily with Alex Matthews, rigger of 11 years. I'll call him the rigger master because I have. And I've been your host / co-host, Jessica Reynolds. If you are curious about learning some of the more basic stuff, we do have a short course with Alex on the AALI platform. It's the Introduction to Rigging is the name, if I'm not mistaken. So you can definitely check that out if you want to learn any more. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for your time. Thanks for your questions. They've been really helpful as well. When I send out the links of the recording, I'll also send out the working file so you can play around with the rig as well. Yes.
Awesome.
All right.
Watch out.
All right. Yes. Bye. Bye for real now. Bye.